China, a shining country, whose social and economic revolution has amazed the world, a country which a few decades ago used to compete with India, now competes with America. Both India and China started off with their economic and social reforms at almost the same time, and while India is still far away from what it aimed to achieve, China on the other hand, has surpassed all expectations. That too at a pace, too fast to be true. But, all that shines is not gold. So, does what China projects itself to be, is really true? Let's find out. The Chinese economic reforms, started in December 1978, by reformists within the Communist Party of China, led by Deng Xiaoping, to save the people of China from starving off severe famines. The idea was simple: make China the manufacturing hub of the world, by utilizing cheap labor. The majority of people in China at that time, were famine-struck farmers, who were ready to do anything for employment, to save themselves, and their families from dying. Their idea worked. China became the manufacturing hub of the world. China then allowed privatization of companies. Everything was going according to plan. China started booming, even more of what they initially anticipated. But, young Chinese companies were unable to manage large contracts. And thus, the Chinese government decided to state-own them, and allow them to take huge loans from the China Central Bank. This is when China started sinking into debt. This move saved the Chinese economy, and Chinese companies went back on track. But now, the Chinese companies started taking even more massive loans to expand their businesses. This gave birth to a new problem. The Chinese companies now not only had to deliver large global contracts, but they also had to earn enough profits to pay off the massive loans, which they owned to the Chinese government. And thus, in order to meet such goals, they started to flood markets in countries like India, Brazil, Mexico, and many other, with cheap and low-quality products. Under such an aggressive expansion policies and demand from the people, the local companies in these countries, doesn't stand a chance, and thus eventually cease to exist. But that's not all. The Chinese government, in its greedy endeavor of becoming an economic superpower and outpace America, is now aiming at global economic dominance. And to achieve this, China has given humongous loans to other countries around the world, in the form of investments, infrastructure development projects, knockoffs of the World Bank, in the name of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank or AIIB, and many other. But, one peculiar and possibly a disastrous economic investment partnership, is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or the CPEC. Experts believe that CPEC will levy Pakistan with such huge loans, that Pakistan may remain trapped in China's debt trap for decades to come, as the CPEC has the potential to destroy Pakistan's agriculture, cotton, and textile industries, which are the only profitable industries in Pakistan. To give you a glimpse of what may happen to a country, if it fails to pay off Chinese loans, take a look at the present condition of Venezuela for example. China went to Venezuela to invest in the country, in the form of infrastructure development and economic growth, but there was a catch: Venezuela had to pay off its debt in the form of oil. And oil prices just in the last couple of years have halved. And thus, Venezuela now owes double of what it initially owed to China. This is a problem for Venezuela, whose entire economy depends on oil. And as a result, Venezuela has went into a crisis. The government has diverted all its resources in paying off the debt, leaving the country to starve. A powerful economy demands a powerful military, and China is leaving no stones unturned in increasing the might of Chinese military with every passing day. China does this, not only to protect assets important to its economic interests, but also as a tool to bully its neighbors. It seems like China is still living in the ancient times, as every now and then, China produces ancient maps from ancient times, to claim territories in 23 foreign countries. This foolish ancient strategy has forced China into territorial disputes with 18 countries, which can escalate into a crisis, and possibly even a world war. As some of the nations involved are also military powers like India, Japan, South Korea, America, Vietnam, and many other. And to counter this, China has raised world's largest standing army, with 2.3 million soldiers, and a military budget of $120 billion, to tackle threats from anywhere and anytime. But is China's People Liberation Army Navy, People Liberation Army Air Force, and People Liberation Army really up to the mark? To remind you, China's People Liberation Army belongs to the Communist Party of China. And thus, all the top military generals are Communist Party politicians. Also, People Liberation Army Navy doesn't even have an aircraft carrier, while India during 2013 to 2016 had two. And whatever weapons they do have are low-quality knockoffs of weapons designed by other countries. As far as soldiers are concerned, they are bound to clear courses on political science, which constitute 40% of their training, while clearing other trainings like combat is not mandatory. And 60% of those who do clear are not medically fit. A country's true power is not only projected by its economic and military might, but also perceived by its technological advancement, which takes decades of research and development. But China likes to do things quickly. So what do you do when you want to achieve decades of research and development overnight? Simple, you hack into and steal others' decades of research and development, and build it before they do. That way you can claim that technology to be yours, since ancient times. And thus, these Chinese knockoffs, or more appropriately, ancient Chinese technologies, can range from stealth fighter jets, space stations, electronics, and everything in between, even food products. You name it and China hacks it. We mean China has it, since ancient times. You must be now thinking, what happens when some company accuses Chinese companies of stealing their technology? Simple, take fresh loans from Chinese central banks and acquire that company. And if that doesn't work, simply say that the technology existed in China since ancient times. Impressed by China's unbelievable growth, many multinational companies from around the world started moving into China. These also included American mega companies that thought of making China the financial capital of the world. But when they arrived, they realized how miserable China's condition actually is. Where they expected skyscrapers, they found slums, full of miserable and oppressed people. They were shocked at this. And thus, the Chinese Communist Party soon realized that China desperately needed a makeover. So they initiated massive infrastructure development projects to destroy slums and build mega-cities full of skyscrapers, solely for the purpose of showing off and improving the image of China. They achieved what they aimed of. And people all over the world started appreciating the effort. But it was not too long that people also started blaming China for building infrastructure solely for the purpose of showing off, and not for the people. So the Chinese Communist Party went a step further, and decided to build hundreds of smart cities all over China. Cities with all the amenities that a modern city should have. And they did it. They did actually build hundreds of smart cities all over China. But the strange thing about these cities were that these cities had everything a modern city should have, except people. Yes, you heard it right. China has built hundreds of cities all over China without a single person living in it. Such is the marvel of China. When an investigation was initiated on China's hundreds of empty smart cities, now more popularly called ghost cities, it was discovered that Chinese people are very poor, even poorer than the poor people of India. It was estimated that around 1 billion Chinese people lived below the poverty line. And thus, the Communist Party of China now had a new challenge to face. It was to lift the people out of poverty. But, as we said, Chinese people like to do things quickly, So how do you instantly lift people above the poverty line? Simple, just lower the poverty line. And thus China again amazed the whole world, by magically lifting 800 million people above the poverty line. And this is how China became a rich country, that too, without any decrease in China's ghost cities. But, that was not all. China now had to face another problem, which was overpopulation. So, the Chinese Communist Party realized that they now had to educate people on birth control. But, like always, China likes to do things quickly, so instead they thought, why waste time in educating people, when you can make a law that makes having babies a criminal offense? And thus, China launched its ambitious one-child policy. But they failed to realize that, over time this would lead to 6 older people for every baby that takes birth in China. And when that child grows up, had to take care of 2 parents and 4 grandparents. But this is not a problem, as more than 88% of Chinese people are rich, as they live above the poverty line. And when asked about how much educated these rich Chinese people are, China quickly replied by saying, more than 96%. This figure is also very surprising because, around the same percentage of people in China, can't speak any other language other than Chinese. This also means that around 8% of poor Chinese people living below the poverty line, earning barely enough money to keep themselves alive, are also highly educated. Now that's truly magical. Experts believe that the secret behind this marvel is ancient Chinese technology. You must be thinking, why doesn't the rich and highly educated people of China revolt against all this? Well, that's because the Chinese Communist Party has built a Great Wall of China in cyberspace, which is also known as the Golden Shield, or the Great Chinese Firewall, which magically converts all Chinese lies into ancient Chinese truth. China is a country where searching about how to revolt against the Communist Party can land you in jail. And making this video could lead you to a death sentence. So people, please like and share our videos, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel, as we are risking our lives to bring you this video. But wait, we do not live in China, we live in a democracy. Jokes apart, in China, you also don't have the freedom of religion or the freedom of press. All local and international news are released to the people from government-controlled media outlets, which adulterate every piece of news with party propaganda. And thus, the people of China believe that foreign countries all over the world steal ancient Chinese technologies, and it's their jealousy towards China that force other countries to encroach into ancient Chinese territories, instead of things being the other way around. The Qing dynasty, which lasted from 1644 until 1912, was the last imperial dynasty of China. The Xinhai Revolution of 1912 brought an end to the Qing dynasty and established the Republic of China. Sun Yat-sen of the Kuomintang, the KMT, or Nationalist Party, was proclaimed provisional president. After Yuan Shikai's death in 1916, China was politically fragmented. His government was internationally recognized but virtually powerless. Regional warlords controlled most of its territory. It was feared that China could break apart into 8 smaller nations. But, just then the Communist Party of China was established, which raised its own army, known as the People's Liberation Army, which was able to influence and unify most of China, except the Xinjiang and Tibet province. The Communist Party wanted to take over the Democratic Party of China, but the Chinese army was strong enough to completely destroy the People's Liberation Army. But, just then the Second Sino-Japanese War happened, which later escalated into a world war. The Chinese army was severely hit and financially drained, as a consequence of war. The People's Liberation Army spotted an opportunity of overtaking the democratic government. And thus, the Communist Party escalated the political unrest into a civil war. The democratic government was overthrown in 1948, and the Communist Party took over in 1949. After taking over, the Communist Party ordered the People's Liberation Army to take over Tibet and Xinjiang by force. The sense of false pride is the root of Chinese nationalism and sovereignty. The Chinese are very proud of their culture. They believe that no one was able to invade the mighty Chinese Empire, which remained intact not because of the mighty Chinese warriors, as the Chinese believe, but by China's geographical features. China is surrounded by high mountain ranges from three sides, followed by vast barren deserts, which makes it virtually impossible for anyone to invade China. Even in modern times, no army in this whole world is capable of fighting a full-fledged war under such treacherous conditions. Another thing which the Chinese are very proud of is their victory in the World War against Japan. In that case, Japan had already occupied huge chunks of land deep inside Chinese territories when America attacked Japan. It was the nuclear bomb which forced Japan to surrender and not the Chinese army, which was actually losing 10 Chinese men for every one Japanese counterpart. Then comes the mighty Chinese economy, which the Chinese boasts of. The Chinese proudly claims that China once reached a GDP growth rate of 15% per annum, which by all means is artificial. A recent WikiLeaks confirms that China's GDP growth rate data is false and clearly man-made. On analysis, the actual growth rate was found to be around 2.5%, when the Chinese claimed it to be at 7%. All these lies told by China makes it very untrustworthy, and prone to suspicion. What China actually needs to work upon is, to stop behaving like a teenage girl, and start projecting itself as a mature power, capable of taking mature decisions. The world laughs at China's blatant lies. If China fails to understand the weight of this matter, then China will end up projecting itself as an entertainment to the world, instead of a mature power. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Do check out our other videos as well. Links to a few are on your screen. Please subscribe and do not forget to hit the like button. See you in another video. Thanks for watching.